She's not worth keeping, Mother, I see that now. The crystal tumbler slipped from Natasha's fingers, catching on the marble countertop with a sound that should have alerted them. But Alex's voice continued from the study, cold and final, each word a blade sliding between her ribs. She'd come home early from the hospital fundraiser, exhausted from smiling at people who looked through her like she was decoration on her husband's arm. The penthouse was dark except for the light spilling from Alex's study. She'd been about to call out to him, to share the small victory of securing a major donation for the children's wing, when his mother's voice stopped her cold. I knew you'd come to your senses eventually. Margot's satisfaction was audible even through the door. That woman was never right for our family. Natasha pressed herself against the hallway wall, her heart a war drum in her chest. This couldn't be happening. Not Alex. Not the man who'd proposed under the northern lights, who'd whispered promises against her skin, who'd looked at her like she was the answer to questions he'd spent his whole life asking. She tried, Alex said, and Natasha heard something in his voice she'd never heard before. Resignation maybe, or disappointment. I'll give her that. But she doesn't understand our world. She never will. Breeding shows, darling. Margot's voice dripped with vindication. I told you when you married her. A school teacher from Brooklyn? She was always going to be out of her depth. Natasha's hand found the wall, steadying herself. A school teacher from Brooklyn. As if those words were an indictment. As if the 5 years she'd spent teaching literacy to underprivileged children meant nothing. As if marrying Alex had somehow required her to apologize for who she'd been before him. The divorce will be clean, Alex continued, his tone businesslike now, discussing the end of their marriage like it was a failed merger. Nolan Wells bombshell. What was revealed at the coroner's office? Nolan Wells bombshell. Key statement exposes what happened at the coroner's office. She's not worth keeping, Mother, I see that now. 6 words. That's all it took. Natasha Reyes stood in the dark hallway of the penthouse she called home, one hand pressed flat against the cold marble wall, listening to her husband discuss the end of her marriage like he was closing a business deal. She hadn't made a sound. He didn't know she was there. 15 feet away, invisible in her own house, listening to the man who once told her she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked, call her disposable. What would you do if you heard the person you trusted most planning your goodbye, in a voice that didn't even shake? Welcome back to Mr. Asborn Golden Narratives, the place where we tell the stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. If you're new here, this is exactly the kind of story we tell every day: betrayal, strength, and the kind of love that has to be rebuilt from nothing. Settle in. 3 years before that hallway, Natasha Reyes wasn't standing in anyone's shadow. She was standing in front of a classroom. She taught 3rd grade in a public school in Brooklyn, the kind of school where the radiators clanked all winter, and half the kids came in without breakfast. She loved it anyway. Loved it because of that, if she was honest. On weekends, she volunteered with a literacy foundation, teaching adults to read. Men and women in their 40s and 50s who'd spent their whole lives hiding the fact that they couldn't. That's where she met him. Alex Sinclair walked into that community center on a Tuesday evening wearing a suit that cost more than her monthly rent, carrying a check for the foundation that made the director's hands shake when she opened the envelope. You didn't have to come in person, Natasha told him, half joking. Most donors just mail it. Most donors don't want to see what their money does, Alex said. I do. She should have been suspicious of a man that charming. Instead, she was curious. He came back the next week. And the week after that. He started showing up not with checks, but with time, sitting beside grown men as they sounded out words on a page, patient in a way that surprised her, given who his family was. Because Alex Sinclair wasn't just wealthy. He was Sinclair wealthy. 3 generations of banking money. A mother who sat on the boards of museums she'd never actually visited. A name that opened doors Natasha didn't even know existed. Doesn't your family expect you at galas on Tuesday nights? She asked him once. My family expects a lot of things, Alex said. I'm learning to disappoint them selectively, she laughed. She shouldn't have found that as charming as she did, but she did. Here's the thing about falling in love with someone from a different world. It doesn't feel like falling into danger. It feels like being chosen. Alex made her feel like the most interesting person in every room, even the rooms full of people who'd known him since birth. He proposed 8 months later, in Norway, under the northern lights, in a whisper she'd carry for years afterward. I don't want to build a life with anyone else's version of happiness. I want to build mine, with you. She said yes before he even finished the sentence. The wedding was small, smaller than his mother wanted, exactly the size Natasha and Alex had agreed on together. Margot Sinclair sat in the front row in a dress that cost more than the entire reception, her smile so tight it looked painful. She'll come around, Alex promised that night, holding Natasha close. She just needs time. 2 years later, Natasha was still waiting for that time to arrive. It's easy, looking back, to point to 100 small moments and say, there, that's where it started cracking. The dinner where Margot introduced her as Alex's little friend, to a table of business partners. The gala where someone called her the charity case, just loud enough for her to hear, and Alex changed the subject instead of correcting them. The quiet way her wardrobe shifted, piece by piece, from the woman she used to be, into the woman his world expected her to become. But you don't see those cracks while you're living inside them. You only see them once the whole structure gives way. For Natasha, that collapse started on an ordinary Friday night. A hospital fundraiser, a donation she was proud of, a dark hallway, and a door she should have walked past. She'd spent the evening at Lenox Memorial's annual Children's Wing fundraiser, moving through a ballroom of people who looked at her like she was furniture, that happened to be standing near Alex Sinclair. She was used to it by now. She'd learned to smile through it, to focus on why she was actually there, securing a $200,000 donation from a shipping magnate who wanted his name on a hospital wall more than he wanted to actually care about sick children. She'd closed the deal, not with charm, but with genuine belief in what she was asking for. She came home early, buzzing, wanting to tell Alex. The elevator opened onto their private floor, and she noticed every light was off except one place. His study. She could hear voices, his, and beneath it, sharper, more clipped, his mother's. Natasha had every intention of walking in, of saying, "Guess what I got them to donate," and watching Alex's face light up the way it always did when she won something. She'd taken 3 steps toward that door before Margot's voice sliced through it. "I knew you'd come to your senses eventually." Natasha stopped. That woman was never right for our family. That woman. 2 words. That's all it took to turn Natasha's feet to stone. She should have walked in right then, should have pushed the door open and said, "I'm right here, say it to my face." That's what the version of Natasha from 3 years ago would have done, the one who stood in front of a classroom of 8-year-olds and never let anyone talk over her. But something kept her rooted to that spot. Some instinct that told her, "You need to hear this. All of it. Before you say a word." So she stayed, pressed against the wall, listening. She tried, Alex said, and there it was. That tone she'd never heard from him before. Not anger, not passion. Just resignation, like he was reading a quarterly report about a failed investment. I'll give her that, but she doesn't understand our world. She never will. Natasha's hand found the wall behind her, steadying herself against a truth she wasn't ready for. "Breeding shows, darling." Margot's voice practically purred with satisfaction. "I told you when you married her. A school teacher from Brooklyn? She was always going to be out of her depth. A school teacher from Brooklyn. As if the 5 years she'd spent teaching children who came to school hungry meant nothing. As if the 140 adults she'd taught to read for the first time in their lives were some embarrassing footnote instead of the proudest work she'd ever done. "The divorce will be clean," Alex continued. And there it was, the word that changed everything. Imagine standing exactly where Natasha stood. Imagine hearing your husband discuss the end of your marriage, the papers, the attorneys, the timeline, with the same tone he'd used discussing a company that had stopped being profitable. "I've already spoken to the attorneys," Alex said. "She'll be comfortable, of course. I'm not a monster. Not a monster." Natasha wanted to laugh, but no sound would come. What do you call a man who plans to discard his wife while she stands invisible in her own hallway, close enough to hear every word? "And the girl? What's her name? Veronica?" Margot asked, and something in her voice had shifted, lighter now, almost gleeful. "Your father and I had dinner with her family last week. Lovely people, old money. She'd be perfect for you. Veronica Ashford." The blonde heiress who'd been orbiting Alex at every charity function for 6 months. Natasha had laughed about it with him once, secure in a marriage she thought was solid ground. How long had she been the joke everyone else was already in on? It's too soon for that conversation, Alex said. But there was no real resistance in it. He sounded like a man being offered dessert he was already full enough to refuse politely, and not quite meaning it. That was the moment something inside Natasha went very still. Not broken yet. Just still, the way the ocean goes still right before it pulls back from the shore, gathering itself for something much bigger. You're being too generous, Margot said. She signed a prenup. Give her what's contractually required and nothing more. Why reward failure? Failure. That word did something the others hadn't. It reached past the shock and found the anger underneath it. I'll handle it my way, Alex said, and for one flickering second, Natasha heard something that almost sounded like defense. She was my wife. She deserves dignity. Dignity. He was going to divorce her, and somehow, in his mind, that was going to be an act of dignity. When will you tell her? Margot asked. This weekend, Alex said. I've arranged for us to go to the house in the Hamptons. I'll tell her there. It'll be private. Quiet. The Hamptons house, where they'd spent their first anniversary. Where he'd told her he wanted to grow old with her. Where they'd once stood on the back porch at midnight talking about children who'd have his eyes and her stubbornness. He was going to end them in the one place they'd built their future. Natasha finally moved, not toward the door, away from it. One silent step at a time, down the hallway, into the elevator, watching her own reflection multiply in the mirrored walls as the doors slid shut. The woman staring back at her looked like a stranger. Perfect hair, perfect dress, perfect makeup, a beautiful shell with something missing where her chest used to be. She's not worth keeping. Those words didn't just live in her ears anymore. They'd moved in. They were going to be there for a while. If you're the kind of person who feels stories like this one all the way down, this is a good moment to hit subscribe, so you're here for the rest of it. Now, let's follow her out of that elevator. The lobby was empty except for David, the night doorman, a kind older man who'd worked the building for 11 years and called every resident by name like they were family. Evening, Mrs. Sinclair, he said, smiling the way he always did. Need a car? Mrs. Sinclair. The name she'd taken so proudly 3 years ago now sat on her like a costume 2 sizes too small. No, thank you, David, she said. I just need to walk. He looked concerned. It was nearly midnight. Her heels weren't made for city sidewalks, but he knew better than to argue with a Sinclair. Be safe, ma'am. Safe. She almost laughed. She'd felt safe this morning. How quickly safety can become the cruelest kind of illusion. She walked for almost an hour, through a city that didn't know or care that her world had just ended. Couples held hands outside restaurants. A group of friends laughed too loud outside a bar. A woman argued into her phone on a corner, asking someone whether she should forgive them. Did that woman know yet that some hurts don't heal clean, that some words, once spoken, take up permanent residence in your mind, replaying at 3 in the morning for the rest of your life? Her phone buzzed. Alex. Hey, where are you? Just finished up some work. Want to order in? Natasha stared at the screen. The casualness of it. He'd just been discussing the terms of her removal from his life, and now he was asking about dinner like nothing at all had changed. She typed back. Not hungry. Going to stay at Monica's tonight. Girl talk. Monica, her closest friend since their first year of teaching together, the woman who'd stood beside her at the wedding and, quietly, gently, warned her that marrying into the Sinclair family might be harder than love could fix. Natasha hadn't listened. She'd been too in love to listen. Alex's reply came fast. Okay. Love you, 2 words that had meant everything this morning. She didn't respond. Monica's apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in Queens that smelled like jasmine tea and second-hand books. She opened the door in pajamas, took one look at Natasha's face, and pulled her inside without asking a single question first. Wine or whiskey? She asked. Both, Natasha said. They sat on the same worn couch where they used to grade spelling tests together, years before Alex Sinclair ever walked into either of their lives. Natasha told her everything, every word she'd overheard. Every implication, every casual dismissal of who she was, and what 3 years of marriage had supposedly meant. Saying it out loud made it heavier somehow, gave it shape. That absolute. Monica's fury was immediate. What are you going to do? I don't know, Natasha admitted, and the admission felt like failure all on its own. Should I leave first? Beat him to it? Call a lawyer tonight? Is that what you want? The question landed harder than Natasha expected. Want? What did she want? This morning, she'd wanted to build a life. Tonight, she wanted to understand exactly when she'd become something to be managed instead of someone to be loved. I want the truth, she finally said. I want to know who he is when I'm not in the room, because the Alex I married wouldn't do this. Wouldn't sit in a study and let his mother auction off the end of our marriage like it's nothing. People show you who they are eventually, Monica said quietly. Maybe he's been showing you all along, and you just didn't want to see it. That sentence followed Natasha into a sleepless night on Monica's couch, replaying every small moment she'd once explained away. The dinners she'd been quietly uninvited from. The wardrobe that had changed piece by piece into someone else's version of her. The way Alex went silent whenever she brought up her old life, her old friends, her old self. Had he been ashamed of her the whole time? And if he had, did she really want to spend one more day fighting to be chosen by someone who saw her as a project instead of a partner? By 6 in the morning, Natasha had her answer. I'm going back, she said. Monica sat up fast. Tonight? Natasha, you're exhausted. Not tonight, Natasha said. Tomorrow morning, before he can execute his perfect, dignified little exit plan in the Hamptons. I'm going to walk out on my own terms. He doesn't get to control the ending of this. That's the one thing he doesn't get to take from me. The subway ride back into Manhattan felt like moving through a dream that hadn't decided yet whether it was going to turn into a nightmare. Natasha wore yesterday's dress, her makeup smudged, her hair falling loose from its once elegant twist. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman returning from the worst night of her life. What if he's there? Monica asked, walking beside her, carrying a stack of empty boxes they'd grabbed from a corner deli. What if he wants to talk? Then I'll tell him I know, Natasha said. Everything? Everything. But when they reached the penthouse, Alex was already gone. A note sat on the kitchen counter, his handwriting elegant and infuriatingly familiar. Went to the office early. Important meeting. Let's stay in tonight? Order from that Italian place you love. J. The Italian place she loved. Zio's, on the corner of Bleecker, where he'd first told her he loved her 4 years ago. Was he planning to end their marriage over linguine now, or was this dinner just one more performance before the real ending in the Hamptons? Bastard, Monica muttered, reading over her shoulder. Natasha crumpled the note and let it fall. Let's pack. 3 years of a life filled 6 suitcases. Designer dresses Alex had bought because a teacher's salary could never keep pace with his family's expectations. Each one was a memory dressed up as fabric. The emerald silk from the Met Gala, where Margot introduced her as Alex's little friend, to half the room. The black gown from his father's 70th birthday, where someone called her the charity case, just loud enough to make sure she heard it. The cream dress Alex loved most, the one he said made her the most beautiful woman in any room she walked into. Had he meant that, or had that been part of the performance too? Take them all, Monica said. You earned every single piece of that closet. But Natasha didn't want them. She pulled out jeans instead. Sweaters. The comfortable, ordinary clothes she'd quietly stopped wearing, because they didn't fit the image of Mrs. Alex Sinclair. These, she said. Just these. The jewelry was harder to walk away from, not because she wanted it, but because of what it represented. The engagement ring, flawless and meaningless now. The pearl necklace that had belonged to Alex's grandmother, given to her on her wedding day, while Margot's smile stayed tight enough to crack porcelain. She left every piece on the dresser. Let Veronica Ashford wear the artifacts of a marriage that never had a chance against a mother-in-law who'd been sharpening her knives since the wedding toast. Natasha's books were harder to part with, and easier to justify keeping. Your books, Monica said, lifting the box. These matter. Yes, Natasha agreed. Those matter. They were sealing the last box shut when Natasha's phone rang. Alex, her finger hovered over decline. Monica shook her head. Answer it, she said. Don't let him think you're running. Natasha picked up, forcing her voice steady. Hi. Hey. Where are you? Alex sounded almost cheerful. I came home for lunch, wanted to surprise you. The concierge said you left this morning with luggage? Of course David had reported it. Sinclair employees were loyal to the family name, not to her. I'm at Monica's, Natasha said. Technically not a lie. Is everything okay? You sound off. Off, that's what he called it. She'd overheard him planning her removal from his life, and to him, she just seemed off. We need to talk, she said. Silence stretched on the other end of the line. Okay, tonight? Over dinner? No, Natasha said. Now, I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Cancel it. More silence. This sounds serious, he finally said. It is. All right, give me an hour. I'll come to Monica's. No, Natasha said, because she wasn't about to give him the home court advantage of any space he could control. Washington Square Park. The fountain. That's oddly specific. 1 hour, Alex. She hung up before he could argue. Washington Square Park was alive with the ordinary chaos of a Saturday afternoon. Street musicians, chess hustlers, students sprawled across blankets pretending to study. Natasha sat on the edge of the fountain, watching the marble arch shimmer under the autumn sun, and waited. Alex arrived exactly on time, because he was always exactly on time. He wore jeans and a cashmere sweater, his weekend uniform, and his face carried an expression that might have looked like genuine concern, if Natasha didn't already know better. Hey, he said, sitting beside her, close but not touching. You're scaring me a little. What's going on? Where do you even begin a conversation like that? I came home early last night, Natasha said, from the fundraiser. His expression didn't shift. Okay? You were in your study. With your mother. Something flickered behind his eyes then, recognition, maybe, or the first cold understanding that he'd been caught. I heard everything, Natasha said, and she was proud, in some small distant corner of herself, that her voice didn't shake. Every word. The color drained from Alex's face. Natasha, she's not worth keeping. She let the words sit in the air between them, exactly as cold as they'd been through that door. That's what you said, your exact words. He reached for her hand. She pulled it back before he could touch her. You don't understand the context. Then explain it to me. Explain to me how there's a context where those words mean something other than what they very obviously meant. Alex's jaw tightened, the way it always did in boardrooms when a deal started slipping away from him. My mother ambushed me, he said. She showed up unannounced, started in with her usual complaints, that you don't fit in, that you don't understand our lifestyle. She kept pushing, saying terrible things about you, and I just wanted her to stop. I said what she wanted to hear so she'd leave. You discussed divorce attorneys, Alex. You talked about the Hamptons house, about the exact weekend you were going to tell me, about Veronica Ashford, and your parents' dinner with her family. Those aren't vague sounds of agreement to make an angry mother go away. Those are plans. He had the grace, at least, to look ashamed. It sounds worse than it was, hearing it like that. Then tell me how it sounds when you say it. I was frustrated, tired of her constant interference in our marriage. I thought if I gave her what she wanted to hear, she'd finally back off. I never meant a word of it. Did you ever love me? She finally asked. Or did you love the idea of me? The schoolteacher from Brooklyn you could rescue and reshape into someone who belonged in your world? Of course I loved you. I do love you. No, Natasha said, shaking her head slowly. You love who you wanted me to become, not who I actually am. Your mother called me that woman, and you didn't correct her. She said I was out of my depth, and you agreed. She said breeding shows, Alex, and you just let it hang there in the air like a truth we all already knew. My mother is toxic. I know that better than anyone, but you can't judge who I am based on what I say, just to keep the peace with her. Why not? Isn't that exactly when people show you who they really are, when they think no one who matters is listening? He had no answer for that. Which was, in its own way, an answer. So what do you want? Alex finally asked. The question hung in the space between them longer than either of them expected. What did she want? This morning, some fragile part of her had hoped he'd fight for their marriage. But sitting here, watching him search for justifications instead of offering an apology, Natasha understood something with sudden, startling clarity. She didn't want him to fight for her. She wanted herself back. "I want a divorce," she said. Alex looked like the words had knocked the air out of him. "You don't mean that." "I do. I want my life back. I want to be someone who isn't monitoring every word, every outfit, every conversation to make sure I don't embarrass a family that decided I was a mistake before I even walked down the aisle." "We can fix this," he said, desperation creeping into his voice now. "Couples therapy, a fresh start, away from my mother." "You told her I wasn't worth keeping." Natasha's voice finally broke, right down the middle. "And maybe, in your world, you were right. Maybe I'm not worth keeping in a life that was never built to hold someone like me. But I'm worth keeping to myself. And for the first time in 3 years, that's enough." She stood. Alex caught her hand. "Please, don't do this. I love you." "You love the version of me that exists in your head," Natasha said gently, pulling her hand free. "But that woman was never real, Alex. She never was." She walked away through the crowd and didn't look back, not once, not even when Alex called her name behind her. Twice, his voice cracking on the second try. "If you needed her to say that, you're not alone. Let this next part sit with you for a minute, because it's the part where everything Natasha lost starts turning into something she built on purpose." The divorce moved faster than either of them expected. Alex, guilty perhaps, or simply eager to stop feeling the weight of what he'd done, signed whatever his attorneys placed in front of him without a fight. Natasha walked away with more than her prenup guaranteed, enough to build a quiet, comfortable life on her own terms. She moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, back near the neighborhood where she'd grown up. No doorman, no marble countertops, no silent judgment from neighbors who'd always seen her as an outsider wearing the right clothes. Just good light through the windows, and neighbors who smiled and meant it. Monica helped her repaint the walls a soft, sunlit yellow. Helped her hang the bookshelves, helped her rebuild, piece by piece, the life she'd quietly set aside the day she said "I do." "How are you feeling?" Monica asked one evening, 3 months after the papers were signed. "Like I'm remembering how to breathe," Natasha admitted. And it was true. Every day away from that life felt like setting down a weight she hadn't fully realized she'd been carrying. She started tutoring again, just a few kids from the neighborhood at first, helping them with reading after school. It felt like coming home to a version of herself she'd nearly forgotten existed. Alex texted occasionally, asking how she was, suggesting coffee. Natasha kept her replies brief, kind, but distant. "I saw him," Monica said one evening, several months later, at a restaurant downtown, with Veronica Ashford. Natasha braced herself for the pain, the jealousy, the old ache. But what came instead surprised her, a distant, almost gentle kind of pity. For him, for Veronica, for whoever came next in that family's long line of women who were never quite going to be enough for Margot Sinclair, because no one ever could be. "I hope she makes him happy," Natasha said, and, to her own quiet surprise, she meant it. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, a letter arrived. Not from Alex. From his father. Harold Sinclair, a man Natasha had met exactly twice in 3 years of marriage. "Dear Natasha, I owe you an apology I should have offered years ago. I stayed silent while my wife made your life smaller, piece by piece. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. That was cowardice, dressed up as respect. My marriage to Margot has been over in every way that matters for a very long time. Watching her destroy yours was the last straw I needed. I filed for divorce last month. You deserved better, from Alex, and from all of us. I hope, wherever you are now, you've found some peace. Harold." Natasha read it 3 times before folding it carefully and setting it aside. It was kind of him to write. But some apologies arrived too late to change anything. They can only confirm what you already suspected, that you were never the problem in that family. You were simply the first person brave enough to leave. A year after the divorce, Natasha started writing again, not for anyone else, not for a grade or a grant or an audience, just for herself, in the notebook she kept by her bed, filling pages with everything that had nowhere else to go. All the rage, all the complicated grief of losing not just a marriage, but an entire identity she'd spent years building around someone else's approval. Poetry had always been her first language, long before Alex, long before any of it. Monica was the one who finally convinced her to read one out loud, at a small bookstore cafe in the neighborhood, on a crowded Tuesday evening. "You'll be great," Monica promised, squeezing her hand backstage. "Your words are beautiful. People need to hear them." Natasha's hands were shaking as she approached the microphone, a thin collection of her poems tucked under one arm. "This one is called Worth," she said, and she began to read. "He said I wasn't worth keeping, like I was a receipt, a ticket stub, something to be measured against a return policy, and found wanting. But here's what he never understood. Worth isn't handed down by someone else's judgment. It isn't earned through performance. It isn't contingent on fitting into rooms that were never built to hold you. Worth is the stubborn grass that breaks through concrete, the seed that already knows its own becoming, the voice that speaks even while shaking, especially while shaking. I wasn't worth keeping to him, because I was never his to keep. I was always mine. I was always worth everything." The applause was warm and real. People smiled at her, strangers who didn't know her history, who simply appreciated the honesty in her words. Afterward, a man approached, holding her small self-published book like it mattered. "That was powerful," he said. "The poem, the reading, all of it." "Thank you," Natasha said, suddenly shy in a way she hadn't been in years. "I'm David," he said. "I teach literature at the college nearby. I'd love to have you come speak to my students sometime, if you'd be open to it." "I'd like that," she said, and found that she meant it. They talked for an hour that night. About poetry. About teaching. About the strange, unplanned ways life bends when you least expect it to. He was easy to talk to. He made her laugh without trying too hard. And this mattered more than she expected. He never once asked about her past, like it was the most interesting thing about her. When they said goodbye, he asked for her number. She gave it to him, feeling something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Hope. Monica was grinning by the time Natasha made it back to their table. So, nothing. He's nice. We'll see. You're glowing." "I'm not glowing." "You absolutely are." And maybe she was. Maybe letting go of what had broken her had, all along, been quietly making room for something new. Not a rescue. Not a project to be reshaped and approved of. Just a possibility, standing on its own 2 feet. Her phone buzzed as she gathered her things to leave. "Alex, I read your book," the message said. "I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better. You deserved to be kept." Natasha stared at the words for a long moment. Then she deleted the message without responding. Some apologies arrive too late to matter. Some wounds are meant to scar over, not be reopened over and over at someone else's convenience. And besides, he'd gotten it wrong, in the end. She didn't need to be kept by anyone. She needed to keep herself. Her voice. Her truth. Her own stubborn grass, breaking through concrete, one determined season at a time. The elementary school library was full of wide-eyed third graders the day Natasha came to read from her new children's book, a collection built around one simple idea: finding your voice, even when the world tells you to make yourself smaller. Who here has ever felt like maybe they didn't belong somewhere? She asked the room. Nearly every hand shot into the air. Children understand exclusion better than most adults ever admit. "This book is for you," Natasha told them. "For anyone who's ever been told they're not enough. Or too much. Or not quite right, somehow." She read to them, watching small faces light up with recognition, page after page. These were her people, the loud ones, the different ones, the ones who colored outside every line and asked the questions no one wanted to answer. After the reading, a small girl approached, hugging the book tightly to her chest. "Miss Reyes? That poem about the grass. That's like me. My dad says I'm too loud." Natasha crouched down to meet her eyes. "You are exactly the right amount of loud. The world needs loud sometimes. Don't ever let anyone convince you to be quiet." The girl beamed and ran back toward her teacher, clutching the book like a small, precious secret. Natasha's phone buzzed. "David. Dinner tonight? I'm making that pasta you like." She and David had been together for over a year now, slow, steady, built on honesty instead of performance. He knew everything about Alex, about the marriage, about the divorce. And not once had he made her feel like her past was something to apologize for. You're proof that surviving doesn't make you damaged, he told her once. It makes you brave. She texted back a yes, gathered her things, and stepped out into the afternoon sun. Monica was waiting for coffee, freshly engaged now, to a fellow teacher, already asking Natasha to help plan the wedding. Harold Sinclair had quietly sent a generous donation to Natasha's literacy foundation, with a short note saying how proud he was of the work she was doing. Even Alex, at last, had gone quiet. Word reached her, eventually, that Veronica had walked away too, tired, it seemed, of Margot's endless interference. Some patterns only stop repeating once someone finally has the courage to break them. As Natasha left the school that afternoon, one of the teachers stopped her at the door. That girl, Amara, the loud one, she told me today she wants to grow up and be brave. Like you. Brave. Like her. 2 years ago, Natasha had stood frozen and invisible in her own hallway, listening to her worth get negotiated away by two people who never once thought to ask what she wanted. She thought, in that moment, that her life was ending. She hadn't known yet that it was only just beginning. The words that shattered everything eventually taught her the truth that mattered most. She never needed to be worth keeping to anyone else. She only needed to keep showing up for herself. Day after day. Word after word. Breath after stubborn breath. The grass doesn't break through concrete because it's strong enough to crush stone. It breaks through because it's patient enough to find the cracks. Natasha was the grass. She was the crack. She was every inch of ground she'd reclaimed, one determined season at a time. And finally, she was enough. And that's where we leave Natasha tonight. Not broken, not waiting to be chosen, but standing fully in a life she built with her own 2 hands. If this story moved you, the best thing you can do right now is subscribe, so you're here for next story, and tell me in the comments which part hit you the hardest. This has been Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives. Thank you for spending this hour with us. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and each other.